Hello, good evening, welcome. I am Samuel Trapp. This is International Flavor. You are listening to Damn Radio. Tonight is Sunday night. It's a deep dive. This is actually being pre recorded. So if you have joined me on my live Podbean stream, feel free to join in and make comments there as well. I also accept live call ins on my Podbean, and you can always listen to my shows, which are later stored at internationalflavor.com. And you can always go back and listen to each and every one of those shows. And I am on live from Sunday night through Thursday night each week from 9 p.m. until 10:30 p.m. Chicago time. Tonight I'm recording from Lithuania. I am here on my way back to the United States from Moscow, where I have been traveling. And so I am headed back after this trip. And I will be back in Florida in the United States later this week, and I will be doing my live shows from there. So this one is being pre recorded, but is actually being done live on my Podbean stream. And it will be played on Sunday night at 9 p.m. Chicago time. And so you can listen to it live then. Or you can, as I said, always listen to them live at internationalflavor.com. I'm glad to have you, glad for you, your listenership, glad for the people that like and share the program and would like to keep on going. Tonight's topics, I've got a little bit that I'm doing about BRICS, and there was some very big news on Russia, India, China, the big three. And I've talked about this previously quite a bit before. If you look at BRICS, right in the middle of BRICS is RIC, and they are the big players. And it was Sergei Lavrov who suggested last week that this triumvirate continue to develop and create a new world order. And he was talking about it. Well, I did a little bit of putting together of my thoughts on the matter, and I have quite a bit to go through on that, and that I wanted to share with you. Because if you're unaware of how the world works, perhaps you should get used to it. And I think this is a longer, on Sunday nights, I try to do a 2 hour deep dive. And so I've got quite a bit of information to go through for you. And I think it's pretty critical. So if you're Donald Trump, and this is on the heels of the recent meeting with Vladimir Putin in Alaska, which the West has pretty much slammed, as their Trump is kissing Putin's butt and stuff like that. That I don't really see it that way. I saw him as honoring a global leader, but then again, I suppose you could see the difference in how he treats Zelensky versus how he treats Putin. But the truth is, Putin's in a completely different category than the Green Goblin. He just is. And, I suppose you should be respected if you're the leader of a country. And I don't disrespect Zelensky. Well, I suppose I do if I call him the Green Goblin. And I probably shouldn't, but I'm not alone. But people say he's not legitimate, and that there's some real concern with whether he would be able to sign any agreement, whether he'd be able to sign any. So, but at any rate, that's not the point of tonight's show anyway. But that will come into it as we discuss what is going on here. But here on International Flavor, where everyone knows the truth just tastes better, tonight we're going to take a look at, I don't know, what I'd like to call the heart of the global transformation, the shift in power, the shift in trade, the shift in influence that, frankly, I believe most Americans do not see. And I don't believe they see it because, number one, they don't want to. And number two, they're not told about it because our leaders, our politicians, and our media don't want you to see it. Or if you do see it, they want you to think differently of it. So I want you to think about this headline that just came out, like I said. Three global giants, three global superpowers. Whether you call them individually or jointly on par with what we have in the United States, obviously, America is, well, maybe I shouldn't say obviously anymore, but obviously, America is the global superpower, right? They've been treated as such for a long time. I think the winds of change are upon us, but that's me. And I'm going to hopefully, maybe you'll be convinced of some of that tonight. Okay. But these three giants, Russia, India, and China, are meeting. And they're not just meeting, they are building. And the world they are building doesn't necessarily leave any room for U.S. global domination and U.S. I don't want to call it dictatorship, but the fact is that the U.S. has dictated policy and who's going to do what for a very long time, at least the last 30 years. If not, well, certainly since the collapse of the Soviet Union. But China and India are coming into their own, and I'm going to give you a thesis to work with. So if you stick with me here, you'll see where I'm going. Let's roll back the clock just a few weeks ago. The cameras in Alaska caught Vladimir Putin sitting across from Donald Trump. They caught Vladimir Putin being the first to speak at a press conference. They caught Vladimir Putin riding in Trump's limo. They caught Vladimir Putin being greeted on a red carpet by Donald Trump. These are images, of respect. These are images of working together. These are images of a CEO, a businessman greeting another CEO and businessman that he values. He realizes they're on equal playing field. He did not do any such thing with Zelensky. And I know that's to the depression of the old Z-Man. Z-Man likes to be the center of attention. And the fact is, with Donald Trump, he isn't. Okay? So the images alone, they tell a story too, right? Just those images, the ones I just gave you, the red carpet, the ride in the limo, and the first word. And I told you before, Putin spoke for 9 minutes to Trump's 3 in that 12-minute appearance before the press afterward. Okay. And Putin controlled that conversation. And I'm not saying that's bad. It's, I think Trump did that on purpose. I'm not saying Trump made any mistakes here in any of that. I think he was potentially shifting, hopefully shifting a change, and a shifting that, we anything else that we do is going to escalate the war, and the U.S. isn't going to have anything to do with escalating the war. I hope, and I hope that between Saturday night when I'm recording this and Sunday night when it is actually played live on damradio.com/live, that nothing has changed in that regard. But I don't think that it is. But the images tell a story. No matter how many sanctions, no matter how much pressure, Washington needs. Donald Trump needs Moscow in the room. I mean, no, they didn't settle Ukraine. They didn't sign any treaties. But symbolically, Donald Trump admitting something the rest of the West rarely admits out loud. Russia cannot be erased. Russia cannot be marginalized. Russia cannot be canceled like everyone is trying to cancel them. Okay. While pundits in DC are still spinning what happened in Alaska, you can call what I'm saying spin, but I don't think so. These things occurred. Something else was happening thousands of miles away. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi touched down in New Delhi, India. Not a ceremonial trip, but a working mission. The boundary talks with India's National Security Advisor Ajit Doval, strategic consultation with Foreign Minister Jaishankar, who I love listening to, a handshake with Prime Minister Modi. In other words, China is reminding the world that even when their relations are strained, because remember, China's relations with India are quite strained as well. They've had armed conflict within the past 5 years, right? They each killed each other's people on that small border skirmish, but still a skirmish. And they've tried to put that aside last year, even at the BRICS conference, like I've told you before. But China's reminding us that even if relations are strained, they keep the dialogue open with their partners. And I think Donald Trump is doing the same thing. Then comes Sergei Lavrov, my guy with the USSR shirt. I really like that look, and it's a great fashion statement. I might have to do that myself. Russia's foreign minister did not mince words. He said, it's time to revive the RIC format. What's the RIC format? Russia, India, China. Now remember, since then, we've got an increase in tariffs on India because they're buying Russian oil. Okay, so a lot of this is going to have to do with that. For some listeners, the RIC might sound like another acronym, another alphabet soup of global politics, but it does matter. Why does it matter? Because for the first time in a long time, Russia, India, and China are looking at each other and saying, we too have disputes, but we also have a lot of common interests. And those interests are bigger than the fights. In fact, that was part of what they said when I was at the BRICS conference last year in Kazan, Russia. They were talking about putting aside their disputes and working together for economic and other geopolitical benefit. U.S. always seems to forget that. Europe completely forgets it, but BRICS is about that. Why did Pakistan not get invited to join BRICS? Because they're in a dispute with India. They have to get rid of those disputes before they can be invited, right? But think about this. India is a big key here, right? New Delhi's whole foreign policy can be summed up with two words: strategic autonomy, right? They don't want to be chained to Washington, D.C., they don't want to be dominated by Beijing. So they sit in at the Quad with the US and Japan. They are in the BRICS conference with Russia, South Africa. They're in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization with China, Central Asia, and yes, they are willing to participate in RIC, Russia, India, China. That's not indecision, that is design. That is India saying to the world, we are not a pawn, we are a player. And by the way, they've been saying this for a while. They want the UN changed to give them more structure. They're the largest population in the world, and they don't get a say at the UN, basically, or very little. You know, there are people with veto powers that got, one tenth of what they got, people wise, or less of what they got people wise. Nonsense. They have a fraction and they're not being able to do it. Well, for Russia, this revival, if they can bring back RIC, is gold. It shows that Moscow isn't isolated and they're not looking westward. They're not really bogged down in Ukraine. I don't believe they are anymore. That's a dispute, but it's being managed. Okay. But Russia is an Asian power. It's a Eurasian bridge. It's indispensable to India's energy, China's security, and that gives the Kremlin far more leverage than any sanction can take away from them, right? What is RIC really? I mean, seriously, think about it. They haven't really participated that way, especially in the last 10, 15 years. They've been focused a little bit more on BRICS, right? Excuse me. So is what they've been. And I apologize if there's echo. As I said, I'm traveling And I'm not really in a studio, I'm in an apartment. But that's what we're doing today. And hopefully the sound isn't too horribly distracting. Anyway, RIC is, I want you to hold an image. When you think of RIC, Russia, India, China, the image I want you to hold in your mind, imagine a three-legged stool. One leg is India, a billion people, a growing economy, and they have energy needs from hell. They need all kinds of energy, right, to keep that many people going. Another leg is China, who, in addition to needing energy, they have manufacturing might, financial muscle. They got shit pots of money, and a population just under India's at 1.4 billion, I mean. And the third leg is Russia with huge natural resources, immense. They have military weight and a willingness to defy the West. They've shown that they will stand up to the West, right? Alone, each of these legs do wobble, but they form a joint seat sturdy enough to carry real weight. A little bit of a metaphor for you, but there you go. But the catch is RIC isn't just talk, it's projects. I mean, for real, these are real projects that I'm going to tell you about. Okay. They're real things that you can touch, things they have done over the past many years, things that they are building right now, infrastructure, development, everything, rail lines, ports, pipelines, nuclear power plants. These are the foundations of a new world order. And if you want to understand influence in the 21st century, you don't look at speeches in Washington or in Brussels. You look at where the steel is being laid and, more importantly, who is paying for it. When Franklin Roosevelt built the Bretton Woods system after World War II, it wasn't the speeches that mattered. It was the architecture of money. The IMF, the World Bank, the dollar as a reserve currency, those have been the tools of American influence for decades. But today, the tools aren't just financial, they're logistical. They're the corridors and the supply chains, the energy grids, the ports. And right now, the West isn't laying them. RIC is laying them down. That's what's happening. So let's put it bluntly, right? We talk a lot about multipolarity on this show, but multipolarity isn't just a slogan. It isn't a prediction that I have, that I've talked about. It's happening. It's in the steel rails being welded in northern Iran, of all places, right? It's in the port contracts being signed in the Arabian Sea. It's in the reactors Russia is shipping to India. And it's in the gas pipelines that cross Serbia. Did I say Serbia? I sure did. Siberia into China. Well, my promise to you is that we're going to walk through each of these projects and tell you why it's important. I'm going to show you how they knit these three giants together and how they get into Europe, Africa, the Middle East, and how the U.S. is not at the head of the table. In fact, some would argue they're not even at the table, right? Listeners, please think about this. Who decides the routes of the future? Who's deciding them? It's not America. Who decides where the ships dock, where the trains unload, where the energy flows? Whoever decides those things is deciding the rules of the game, and the RIC is deciding them. The US is not. We're going to go through these 5 mega projects first, okay? International North-South Transport Corridor is one. India's Chabahar Port, number 2. Eastern Maritime Corridor to Vladivostok. Kudankulan Nuclear Plant, India. And Russia's power of Serbia pipelines. Okay, these are not ideas that people are talking about. They're contracts that are being fulfilled. They're cranes on the ground. They're proof the global order is shifting in real time. That is what's going on. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization, we'll refer to that as the SCO. And the Quad, just so you know, the Quad is the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue, which is US, India, Japan, and Australia. Now, India is involved in a lot of different aspects of these things. Now, let's talk about the 5 flagship RIC projects. They're not an idea. This is not something that they're planning in the future. They've fulfilled a lot of these things. This is a platform where Russia, India, and China have gone from talk into action. Specifically, I don't want you to go away tonight with just opinions, but with real images. Think of this: ships docking, trains moving, reactors operating, and pipelines flowing. Images of power, real, tangible power being laid across Eurasia, one of the fastest, if not the fastest growing area of the world. Certainly India and China. And there's a lot to be said about the Russian connection and all of the STAN areas, I like to call them. So let's talk first, and I'll try to quickly get through all of these. The International North-South Transport Corridor, INSTC, and the Rasht-Astara rail system. A train leaves Mumbai, India, heads north through Iran, and within weeks, it's unloading in Moscow. At 40% level travel time, 30% less cost than the old route through the Suez Canal. That is the INSTC. 40% less travel time. Does that equate to money? Absolutely. That is what the International North-South Transport Corridor is. And it isn't hypothetical. Trial runs have been done. Cargoes of rice, steel, advanced machinery have already made the trip. The missing link, a 162-kilometer rail stretch between Rasht and Astara in Iran, is financed and being built even now. Russia has put up over €1 billion for it, and Iran is pushing to finish construction this year. Every shipment that goes through this corridor bypasses the Suez Canal. It bypasses U.S. patrolled water. It bypasses choking points. These are not logistics. This is long-term strategy. That's number one. This north-south corridor, transport corridor. Number two, Chabahar Port, India in Iran. The second project, this one makes Washington nervous too. Chabahar Port. India, the country, India, not a company in India, but India, signed a 10-year operating agreement in May of 2024 to run a port on Iran's southeastern coast. Why does this matter? Because it connects directly to the INSTC we were talking about earlier. Chabahar is India's way of accessing Central Asia and Russia without touching Pakistani soil. They don't have to. They can get around it and go through Iran. And that's not about geography. It's about geopolitics. Pakistan has long been an obstacle between India and Eurasia. India's been trying to get around them for a while. And the U.S. knows it and plays with that, difficulty, let's call it. Next time you hear Washington talking about isolating Iran, remember, they really want to isolate India too. And India is running one of Iran's most strategic ports, and Russia is building the rail line that plugs it into the Eurasian grid. That's RIC. Okay, let's talk about the Eastern Maritime Corridor. This one's Chennai Vladivostok sea route. Now let's go east from southern India's Chennai port to Vladivostok in Russia's far east. A new sea lane is open, the Eastern Maritime Corridor. It was announced years ago, written off by some as too ambitious. It actually became operational last year. Indian officials say it saves about 16 days of travel time compared to older shipping routes, and it cuts foreign costs by 30%. But it's more than just shipping shortcut. The corridor ties India directly to Russia's resource-rich Far East. Timber, coal, oil, gas, and it opens the door for Indian companies to invest where Japan and Korea once dominated. It's a reminder that the Pacific isn't just America's backyard, it's an ocean with many doors, and India is opening one with Russia. Okay, the other one, another big one. The Kudu-Kalam nuclear power plant, Russia-India energy backbone. It's energy in southern India on the shores of Tamil Nadu is the new power plant, Kudankulam nuclear power plant, built by Russia's Rosatom. It already is India's largest nuclear facility. Units 1 and 2 are running, and units 3 through 6 are under construction. And just this year, Russia shipped the reactor vessel for unit number 6. Despite sanctions, they've done this. Despite the war, Moscow is delivering. Why is this important? Because nuclear power is not just kilowatts of power, it's a 60-year partnership. It's engineers, it's supplying fuel, it's maintaining systems. Kudankulam locks India and Russia together in a long-term energy relationship that no tariff or sanction can undo. That's the problem for the US. We're not involved in these things, right? Finally, let's talk about the power of Serbia. God, I said it again. Damn it. What is wrong with me in Siberia today? And I keep calling it Serbia. What is the problem with the power of Siberia? I can't say the words. But the power of Siberia 1 is already pumping gas from eastern Russia into northern China and is expected to reach its full design capacity of 38 billion cubic meters per year in 2025, this year. And the power station for Siberia number 2, a second line that cuts through Mongolia, would add another 50 billion cubic meters annually. Those are ongoing. Beijing is cautious. But even if Power of Siberia 2 doesn't get off the ground this year, the first line is already changing the energy map. So all the gas that keeps flowing is gas that isn't paid for with US dollars, that is avoiding any dollar hegemony, is avoiding US sanctions. So there you have it. Those are the 5 projects. There's a corridor, a port, a sea lane, a nuclear power plant, and a pipeline. Each one is different, but together they're forming, I don't know, what would you call it? The spine of Asia. And once that spine is built, it doesn't just connect the countries, it shifts global influence, which it's already doing. Why do you think the US has been meddling so much in the Far East? All the stands. Why are they trying to interfere with these things and keep Pakistan at the throat of India? Why is that? Well, a lot of it's economic, and don't think that our Daddy Trump doesn't know this, because I argue that he does, and that he's very much aware of it, which is one of the reasons that he treats Vladimir Putin the way he does, because Vladimir Putin is very much involved in these things, and I believe that Trump sees that there's really not a whole lot we can do about it, because there isn't. These tariff talks and sanctions. Who are they pushing on right now? You saw that they didn't. That Trump put another 90 days on China, right? Put another 90 days for us to negotiate with China on these tariffs, trying to get them to stop, Russia, or force Russia to do something, quit buying Russian oil in order to get rid of the sanctions, right? And what has that done? Nothing to China. He put them off. Who did they push? They pushed India. They think the weak link is India. That's what Trump thinks. I think he thinks that that's the weak link. I don't agree with him. I think multipolarity is here. I think multipolarity isn't going anywhere. And that these 5 projects are pretty important. They're proof that it's going elsewhere. They're the rails, ships, reactors, pipelines. This is what multipolarity looks like. Real, concrete, real still. And they carry a message. The US doesn't and cannot control these flows. RIC, like Sergei Lavrov said, is creating a new world order. Now, you can disagree with that, and I'm not positive that I think it's creating a new world order, but it's certainly shifting the power game. So let's leave Asia, and just for an example portion, let's get to our own hemisphere. What is the US doing? What is the Western Hemisphere doing? What are Europe, Asia, the Middle East doing in any sort of similar programs? When we get through this, I think it's probably going to frighten you a little bit. Frighten is probably not the right word. It'll probably get you thinking a little bit about where this actually, where the power shift is going. I think you'll definitely see my point, right? You'll see it. You'll see why the U.S. is falling behind, even in its own backyard. Spoiler alert, most of these new mega projects south of the Rio Grande are funded by who? China, not the US. So it's let's have a look at that stuff. Remember these things. INSTC is the International North-South Transport Corridor that I told you about. Chabahar Port is Iran. EMC, Eastern Maritime Corridor, India's new place with Russia, and Power of Siberia 1 and 2 are Russian natural gas pipelines to China, one of them through Mongolia. That's not quite done yet. And who's Rosatom? That is Russian State Atomic Energy Corporation. Now, I'm of the belief in a lot of ways that especially China and Russia have a lot of state owned, state directed industries. Now, India is a little bit different as well, but they have a different way of running things than the US does also. Like the state operating the port in Iran. I mean, what do you think of that? These are big deals. They have a different form of government than what we have in the West, and sometimes our very, whether you want to call it freedoms or our very structure, sometimes dictates that we can't move swiftly. We can't get private. We spend all this time in debate and discussion trying to get something done. And the U.S. funding it doesn't mean anything other than the U.S. turning the money over to some private company to do it for them. It's not like the U.S. is going to run a port for somebody else. Remember Donald Trump when we first started his term? wanted to get China out of the Panama Canal on either end. This is part of that discussion, right? Think about that. So, for the truth of it all. But in the West, the unfortunate part is we have a lot of fragmentation and a lot of Chinese shadow anyway. Let's step out of Asia and into the West, because this will make the story get even more clear for you, and it should make you even more uncomfortable. If that's the right word that you want to, look at it. In the Western Hemisphere, you would think that the United States would be the unquestioned leader in our own infrastructure and in dealing with our own neighbors. You would think that with Canada to the north, Mexico to the south, and Latin America going all the way down to the South Cone, Washington would be building railways, Washington would be building ports, they'd be connecting highways, they'd be connecting the entire region together. But the fact is, we're not. Washington has not done anything remotely like that. The 5 biggest north-south projects in the Americas today are either private sector driven, they're piecemeal small projects with national upgrades, or even worse, they're financed by China. Okay, let's go through them. The Canadian Pacific Kansas City Rail. This is CPKC. Imagine one whole train line running from the Canadian Prairie through the U.S. Midwest all the way to Mexico. Isn't that great? That is the CPKC rail system, created when the Canadian Pacific Railway purchased Kansas City Southern in 2023. It is the first and only single line railroad that touches all 3 countries in the USMCA trade pact. Doesn't that depress you in some respects? Isn't that depressing to think about? That one company, that's it, one company has created a rail system by buying another company, another US company, and they've created it. I don't know. That's to me, that's just a little bit depressing. But that's the the CPKC rail system, and it has about 20,000 route miles in total, and it is a pretty big deal as far as grain, auto parts, and energy transport go. But the difference is, this is no government vision. This is no trilateral country summit. This is a corporate merger. Private capital, no state coordination. Useful? Absolutely. Strategic? Not in any way remotely similar to Russia, India, China projects. Okay. Next one. Ports to planes. Think about the ports to planes initiative. This one is almost depressing when you think about it. It's not very big, but the ports to planes is Interstate 27 corridor. The U.S. heartland 27 to Mexico. This project is this ports to plane, and I've been hearing about it for a good long time. It was designated as a future interstate in 2022. And what they want to do is upgrade Route 87 and tie Texas, Oklahoma, and Colorado down into Mexico. So through the heartland of the United States and get us down into Mexico. It sounds impressive, right? I mean, it's supposed to be impressive, but this is trucking. This would be for trucking. So we have one rail line, private company invested. We have an announcement for the new Interstate 27 to tie us into Mexico and to get us all down there through interstate to improve trucking. And to join Texas, Oklahoma, and Colorado. And that's it. Sounds impressive, but it's mostly lines on the map because nothing has happened so far. In September of 2024, the first federally approved segment was announced. So we've announced it, may have even funded it. One whole segment. Meanwhile, the INSTC trains are and have been running back and forth. That's the one on the Russia, India, China side. So think about those contrasts. America talks about creating corridors, but you're stuck in Washington arguing about them forever, or private organizations fund them and the US does not. There's nothing strategic in this. There's nothing infrastructure. For the last 20 years of my lifetime, the US has been talking about infrastructure, repairing our bridges, repairing our highways, creating new, making high-speed rail lines, doing all of these things, none of which have occurred. Or trying to get private funding for the whole thing, but the private branches are just waiting for the government to give them free money to go and do it, and then they get stuck in whatever boondoggle. Federal projects always get boondoggled into. And so I'm not trying to encourage anybody to think that other ways of running your country are better than our democracies or private funding of private strategies. And well, those aren't public concerns, those are private concerns. But we're losing the economic wars of the future already. That's my point. And that perhaps, well, in fact, I don't even think it's perhaps. I think Mr. Trump does know this, and that is one reason he is working so hard to get rid of these wars, because we'll get to that in a little bit later here in this section. But let me finish with the several other projects so you can get a comparison of the five biggies from the Eastern Asia part versus what we're doing. Brazil did one all on their own. They created Brazil, and Brazil is a huge country. They created their own north-south railway called Ferrovia Norte Sul. Down in Brazil, the North-South Railway is a project that took nearly 30 years to complete. It is, as of 2023, operational and links the country's grain sources, they're the largest soybean producers in the world, to Atlantic ports. This is great for Brazil's soybeans, but it's a reminder of how slow, how uneven, how fragmented that infrastructure can be everywhere in the Western Hemisphere. And I mean, think about this. In China, they can lay down an electrified cross-border railway in Africa outside of their own country. They could do it in a decade, and they have. And we'll get to some of that as well. So there's another one. Argentina. Here, I'm trying to keep us in the Western Hemisphere. In Argentina, the Belgrano-Cargas Railway is rehabilitated to haul soybeans, minerals, and more from north to ports on the Parana River. And who's paying for it? Not Washington, not the IMF. It is China. The China Development Bank and the Chinese rolling stock suppliers have poured 2 to 2.5 billion into this line since 2013. This means Chinese-made locomotives, Chinese-made rail cars. Argentina's north is being wired in to a supply chain that runs to Asia. not to the United States. We treat them like backwoods countries and China invests in them. That's a big difference. And that means they're not buying US debt, which is what they used to do. But they're not doing that anymore. Keep track of that because that's actually important. Now, let's talk about probably one of the biggest. This is in Peru, and it is called the Chancay Megaport, and it is a megaport. It is in Peru. It's $3.5 billion port built by China's Costco shipping. You see the Costco containers everywhere, COSCO, shipping. Scheduled online. It's already operational partially. It's supposed to be finished this year. It is designed as a trans-Pacific hub, the very first real Chinese-owned megaport in South America. Remember Donald Trump talking about the Panama Canal and China owning port or running the ports on either side, and him going to take that out and get rid of it. Trust me, he knows what I'm talking about here. But it's part of us we don't doesn't seem like we pay as much attention to it as we ought to. And so I want to make sure that you understand this. Now let's put these threads together on both ends, on the Asia side and then on the Western side. What do we see? In Asia, RIC, Russia, India, China, they're building as a complete bloc. In America, or the Americas, our largest 5 projects are quite small. One private sector rail merger, one U.S. interstate upgrade that is still crawling forward. We got nothing there. The private sector rail merger, that's really a big nothing burger, although it's helping with grain and auto parts from Canada to Mexico. We have one Brazilian national railway that took decades to compete, one Argentinian freight line paid for by Beijing, and one Peruvian megaport owned by Beijing. Where's the U.S. in any of this? The U.S. has nothing to do with the Brazilian railway that took decades. We have nothing to do with the interstate that the U.S. hasn't done crap with. And we have nothing to do with the private sector rail merger with, getting Canadian grain down to Mexico. Very little, except for the purchase of KC Rail had to be approved by somebody. Do you see a pattern? The U.S., we haven't orchestrated or created or done anything. That is not what our politics allow us to do. We aren't orchestrating. We are reacting. Donald Trump is reacting. He's going out and trying to keep China from running the Panama Canal. He's trying to keep China out of whatever other new projects that are coming up. And for years, our focus has been on creating war in other places. China hasn't focused on war. Do you see China run around starting wars around the world? They don't do it. And do you see India doing that? Nope. You generally don't even see Russia doing it until they're forced. The Ukraine conflict is going to come up here a little bit. It does matter. It absolutely matters. But I don't know. The pattern I see is that RIC is in Asia. It's BRI in Africa, right? And it's China in Latin America. And the United States, the supposed hemispheric leader in the West, is watching as others put down steel and pour concrete. We don't do it. Nobody's investing billions of our money in any of those places. China is. If you measure power by who commands military bases, maybe Washington is still the world leader. I'd argue that Maybe even that's not what it seems either. But if you measure power by who is building the railways, the ports, the energy arteries of the future, the scoreboard is quite clear. We know who's in charge, and it's not the US. So, infrastructure, in my humble opinion, is the new alliance system. It doesn't have as much to do with war or creating enemies of other countries like we have been doing for 50 years. The new treaties are rail lines. The new military bases are ports in new parts of the world. And even in our own hemisphere, America isn't the builder of these infrastructure events. China is. Let's take a look back east and look at what China has been doing in Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. The other part of this puzzle, this is global that we are talking about. Let's seal in the lesson that in the Western Hemisphere, the US is fragmented and still under China's shadow, that we have nothing to do with the Far East, and very little even now, and less in Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. Let's talk about that. BRI. You may have heard that referred to before, Belt and Road Initiative. Okay, let's in case there's some again some of the abbreviations you may have needed to hear about that don't know the answer to. Canadian Pacific, Kansas City, CPKC. That's the rail line. And who else? Let's see here. The Belt and Road Initiative, BRI, Belt Road Initiative. So we've gone through Asia's spine, all the rail systems and all the transport corridors in Asia. We've talked a little bit about the fragmentation in the Americas, but let's widen the lens just a little bit. Because if you really want to see where the 21st century is being built, check out the Belts and Roads Initiative. Now, I have talked about this a few times before, but it's Beijing's master blueprint. It's not a single railway or a single port. It's a transport web stretching from Beijing to Duisburg from Mombasa to Djibouti. It's everywhere. It's all over Europe. It's all over the Middle East. It's all over Africa. And it's stretched into, as we pointed out before, Peru, Brazil. Their shipping hubs they're trying to do. They're still a member of BRICS. We haven't even gotten to that yet. So the China-Europe rail. Think about these. The blueprint that we're talking about. The BRI isn't a PowerPoint presentation that I'm putting together here. It's actually being built and or has been built. We're talking cranes, ships, tracks, railways, fiber optic cables in Africa, Middle East, and parts of Europe even. It's the only game in town. Europe can't provide for itself. Just like Africa, they're no different. Who the hell is putting it all in place? China. Let's think about this. Let's talk about the 5 flagships that have shown how far their web is already spread. China's web. And I'm not against this. I'm not saying this is a bad thing. I'm saying the focus of the world shouldn't be on war so much anymore. It needs to be on economics. And we need to get on board and quit pumping war down everybody's throat. We need to pump working together financially, economically, and quit worrying about who's got the biggest appendage in the world. Nobody cares. Everybody wants to live peacefully together and make money and take care of their kids and give some education, make some opportunities. This is worldwide. It's global. And I think, unfortunately, we are supposed to be the people that are pumping this stuff everywhere, and we're taking a back seat. because we disagree with their politics. The rest of the world is saying, we might disagree with your politics, but that doesn't mean we can't work together. India's example is, look, we look out for our own interests. You want to take care of that? Well, you go right ahead, but we're going to run our own country as we see fit. Okay? So let's go through these next set of projects that are coming from China, mostly, with the help, of all the resources coming from natural resource coming from Russia, the people power from India helping out a lot, and the three big powers working together. Let's start with trains. China Europe Rail. It's a new Eurasian land bridge. In 2011, this is not that long ago, friends and neighbors, there were less than 20 freight trains a year running from China to Europe. That's a tiny number. Guess how many there were in 2023? 16,000. They went up in 2024, but nobody has the actual number. And they've gone up in 2025. So China is supplying most of Europe now with cheap goods, just like they are supplying most of Russia with cheap goods. And we're worried about, you want to be involved in our market, you want to put sanctions and you want to put tariffs everywhere, Donald Trump? Okay, it's going to work short term, but long term, nope. Everybody's avoiding. They're playing the avoidance game, and successfully. So I can disagree with our president on some of these things, and I do, but I believe he knows it as well, and he's making an effort to repair while he can, or to arrest, slow down the decline. And I think he's been arguably somewhat successful in that as well. These train lines through China, they end in Madrid, Hamburg, Germany, Duisburg. They're everywhere. They carry cars, electronics, textiles. And on the return trip, what do they get? European wines, chemicals, machinery. These are not just symbolic trips, they're strategic. Europe has been tied to China's supply chain. They give landlocked Central Asia all of the stands, relevance, because all this stuff goes through them, including Iran, by the way. And they run on schedules, not on hypotheticals. These are not just projects they're talking about, they're already running. The China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. Think about this one. China does work with Pakistan, and their economic corridor goes to the Gwadar port. So this is kind of the jewel of the Belts and Roads Initiative, and a shit pot of money went into this. This is 10 times the project that they've put in anywhere else, and it's in Pakistan. This is the jewel of it all. It is China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. Includes highways, power plants, pipelines that link Western China to the Arabian Sea coast through Pakistan. Now that's a big freaking deal. At the end of that corridor is China's Gwadar port. For China, this is access to the Indian Ocean without going through the Strait of Malacca around India. They don't have to. For Pakistan, the infrastructure is on a scale that they could never, ever, in a billion years, have financed or completed alone. Is it controversial? Absolutely. There have been debts, delays, protests. It's all real. And you think India is not concerned? They are. They don't like Pakistan. They have their own disputes that they've gone through. So sure, they have some issues. But it's a huge project. But it's a big vision. And China doesn't have to wait on Singapore or go through U.S. bases around that area. They have their own outlet to avoid all of that. You think this is strategic? Sure as hell is. Think about the ability to get from there, which is the next leg, is East Africa's standard gauge railways and ports on the east of Africa. Mombasa to Nairobi toward Kampala. In Kenya, the standard gauge railway links, and they had to change them all, to link Mombasa to Nairobi. It's built by Chinese firms, financed by 4.7 billion in Chinese loans. And it cuts travel time from 12 hours to less than 4 for all the goods. The plan was always to extend it west further to Uganda, Rwanda, and even the Congo. And that has slowed down some, but that may be revived here. But it is the background of the East-West freight network in Africa, and it was all laid by China. Next, let's talk about Addis Ababa Djibouti, another railway system in Africa, another line at Addis Djibouti Electrified Railway. $4 billion, built by China, financed by China, powered by China. Why does it matter? Because Ethiopia is also landlocked. And without the ability to get their goods to Djibouti's ports, exports are stuck in Ethiopia. But with the rail, Ethiopia can move freight directly to the sea. So China's thinking strategically. Where is the U.S. thinking strategically about trade in the future? Nowhere. We put military bases everywhere and try to control them. This one project in Ethiopia transformed it from a landlocked to a land-linked train hub system, and every single locomotive and train car is stamped made in China, made in China. Think about this. Ports of the Mediterranean and the Red Sea. Port Said, Piraeus, Djibouti, and no, these are ports. Lots of ports, and these aren't the only ones. The most famous is Piraeus, if I'm saying it right. That's in Greece. Once it was a struggling terminal. It's now one of the busiest ports in the Mediterranean. Thanks to, once again, China's Costco bought the majority stake, just like they did in Peru. And you see all those shipping containers that say Costco on them. Those are shipping containers made in China. It's not alone. With this port in Djibouti, China built a multi-purpose port alongside its first overseas naval base. China has a naval base. In Port Said and Port Sudan, Chinese firms have poured money into terminals that sit right on the Suez Canal choke points. The symbolism is enormous for these projects. Europe's entry point, Africa's seaboard, and the Red Sea gateways, all tied to Beijing's port strategy. So we talked about road and bridge, we've talked about ports. What is the big picture here? Europe's freight lanes are increasingly tied to China. Africa's rails and ports are financed by China. Middle East is wired through CPEC and Gwadar, right? And what's America doing? What's America doing? What's Europe doing? They're pulling out Africa because Europe is booting them out. The U.S., we never did anything. We funded regime change. We didn't fund new ports. We didn't fund new railroads. We funded regime change. Do what we say we do, we'll keep the money rolling. That's it. It's a deeply depressing topic for me because that's not what we should have been funding. That is not diplomacy. It's nothing like it. It is colonialism. I hate to say it, but I think there's a lot of truth to that kind of argument, right? It's not about loans on paper, even from China. It's about leverage on the ground. When you build someone's port, you set the rules for what gets to dock there. Who set the rules? Donald Trump proved this. Who sets the rules for Panama Canal? He forced some changes there, did he not? When he first took office. When you build a port, you can set the rules for what people who docks there. When you build their railway, you get to set the schedule for what moves. I didn't even see in the top 5 the railway being built across Mexico above the Panama Canal, right? They're gonna build that. Once again, where is Washington? Nowhere. Criticizes debt that other people are taking or that other people are financing, but it doesn't provide any sort of alternatives. What are we doing? Where are we? We talked about multipolarity before. I think multipolarity is here to stay. I we see America's absence even in its own backyard. And these are not dreams, these are maps. Now let's talk a little bit about BRICS and how RIC, Russia, India, China, still forms the central core, but why Brazil and South Africa are often people think of them just as a symbol, but they're actually engines of and a big part of this. And don't dismiss them because I'm going to explain why they're important too. Let's have a look at what I would like to refer to as the new orchestra. The new orchestra is BRICS. It's new people all talking together. We've laid out the projects. We've traced new trade corridors. We've walked the ports and the railway systems. But now we have to zoom out and say, what is the political roof over everything that we're talking about here? Where is it? And this is where BRICS comes in. Now, you could still say, and I've said this ever since I first got interested in BRICS a couple of years ago. The big 3 players are and will be Russia, India, China. And Brazil is a huge player. South Africa is a huge player. But it's more than just a catchy acronym. It's turning, and some would argue that it already has turned into an institution. It's added summit, development bank, that's important, an agenda. And more recently, it began expanding into BRICS Plus, and it's pulling other countries in, like Iran, like Egypt, Ethiopia, the UAE, Indonesia. But let's be honest here. Not everyone in BRICS is created equal. The core is still Russia, India, China, and they're going to be. And China brings the manufacturing, the finance, market demand. India brings what? Demographic weight, IT services from hell. And truly, they are a balancing voice between the blocks, between everybody. India has some heavyweight influence on the global stage. They are very well thought of. I've told you before of my own personal admiration of Jaishankar and the way he addressed it. My own personal admiration of Modi, who they will not be pushed around. They won't let you turn their country into some backwoods joke. Even now, with the heavy sanctions of Donald Trump and Modi, I believe he just expected him to fold like a cheap suit and fall over. And I don't think that's happened. I truly don't. I don't think it's happened at all. I think that India is waking up, that its politicians are waking up. It cannot be easy to run a country that size with as many different ethnicities in as they are. Same goes for China. whether you want to call it a dictatorship and they don't have any freedoms in China or whatever, whether you want to believe that India is a democracy or not, they still have their same, they, the fact is they're not the US and they are run politically differently and they think longer term than we do. And their countries are run differently. And rightly so. Maybe to some extent, they too are stuck in part, in some kind of uh, quagmire discussion with regards to certain projects, with regards to certain sectors and population groups. Gridlock is what we call it for Washington, D.C. Ours is eternal. But it seems like to me, they always seem to get something done where we never do. When are we going to get something done? I always feel like we don't. And I would prefer that we did. So the people on the periphery of BRICS are Brazil and South Africa, right? The core is Russia, India, China. China manufacturing, India demographic, Russia with resources. Those are the core. But what about Brazil? Brazil is huge, no question. It's the world's top soybean exporter. It's an agricultural superpower and the anchor of South America. But in global infrastructure, it doesn't drive agenda. It took them 30 years to finish the North South Railway. The ports are national, not global. Brazil aligns more with China than with India or Russia. South Africa is even more clear. Its role seems to be pretty symbolic. It brings Africa's voice to the table and it makes BRICS look somewhat global, not just Eurasian, but it doesn't have the capital, the mega projects, or the geopolitical power to shape any sort of outcome. That doesn't mean that Brazil or South Africa are not relevant, because they are. They create legitimacy, they expand the power of BRICS, and all these other countries coming in are also there. The ability to pour concrete and set standards, I believe, are the three that are there. And where it gets interesting is since 2023, when not first, but since when I became far more interested in checking out and aligning my getting into the alignments of BRICS. BRICS has been anything but static. It's not changed. I mean, I'm sorry, it's changed dramatically. In 2023, they expanded to BRICS Plus. I told you some of the countries: Saudi Arabia, UAE, Egypt, Ethiopia. Why them? Energy, location, legitimacy. Iran and Saudi are both oil giants. Egypt and Ethiopia are African continentals. And the UAE is the hub of finance. They got so much money, it's not even funny. It's almost embarrassing that that uh, that that they are involved, but they are. UAE is definitely involved. The it's cohesion being built. Cohesion is being built by this BRICS expansion, right? Uh, it, and again, legitimacy, more importantly. And the influence of BRICS is still huge. Critics are going to tell you BRICS is not NATO, it's not the EU, it's not very cohesive. Some of them have border disputes, trade rivalries, competing agendas. That's very true. But the cohesion isn't the point. The point is the options. The point are the alternatives. When BRICS countries trade in their own local currencies, which they do, or talk about building payment systems outside of SWIFT, which they already have, or setting up the new development bank as a World Bank alternative, which they've done, They've created options. And what does that do? Reduces U.S. leverage and influence. That's the power of BRICS. That's what allows India to snub their nose at Donald Trump and his sanctions and his tariffs and anything related there too, because the power structure is changing. This is what I've been saying for a year. You can't force people to, oh, geez, you can't have BRICS. I'll destroy BRICS. I'll throw some sanctions your way. Nope, you're just making BRICS get bigger and more relevant faster. BRICS doesn't have to replace the dollar tomorrow. It has to give members the choice to not use the dollar. And that is already happening. So therefore, the orchestra of the world now has BRICS and it has UN or economic platforms, Western dominated, that are both there. But the conductor, I don't know if the conductor is any longer the EU or Donald Trump or the US. We're still a part of the music, a big part. But the conductor is now they have two conductors. And Russia, India, China is a very big part. Brazil may play the strings. South Africa can, get there, but those that set the pace, Russia, India, China. Russia, India, China. The more Washington tries to divide BRICS, the more it expands. Sanction Russia switches to China and India. Pressure India, New Delhi doubles down on strategic autonomy. Isolate Iran, Iran joins BRICS. The center of gravity is moving, and BRICS has become a flag for that movement. So let's pull all this together. With the Middle East on board, BRICS is a huge counterweight. When we talk about multipolarity, we can't stop at infrastructure. We have to see the political framework. And more, that's turning to BRICS. That's what's happening. Oh, crap. I've lost my page here. And I can't breathe anyway. So there you have it. Excuse me. I might stop and take a sip of my coffee. You may not agree with me that the U.S. is creating its own sort of isolation. What I want you to take from this is a different perspective that Donald Trump knows what he's doing. That Donald Trump is very well aware of why these things are critical. I remember when he first came into office, and I had serious questions about why he's wasting my time with the Panama Canal, why he's wasting my time talking about Greenland, and why he is focusing on things that might not be a big a deal, like the Arctic Circle, like, North Pole. Why? Well, I think that part of it is what I'm explaining to you or going through with you right now. I think he realizes that the way the world has been developing and the way that we've been influencing that development are not long-term success stories. Creating more war is not what the world wants. Hell, it's not what America wants. I don't know that America ever has one today. It's, in a way, it's depressing to me because I feel like we're missing the power just went out. I feel like we're missing the boat on some of this, and I dislike it. And but I also see that Donald Trump is focusing that way. I mean, you can talk about this, whatever he did with Vladimir Putin in Alaska and say that it worked, didn't work. He was kissing Putin's butt or whatever. I don't think so. I think he was acknowledging the new realities. That's what I think. And do I think that everybody respected Donald Trump? Yes. Do I think that the rest of the world respects Donald Trump? I think they're starting to. I think they do now more than they did in his first term. Just the perseverance of that guy is incredible that he can go through this. But I also think he knows a lot of the things that I'm talking about here. And I don't believe he will. I don't know that he can stop a lot of it, but I think that what he's trying to do is to ensure that the U.S. doesn't get left behind or remain left behind, right? We've gone pretty far tonight. We've looked at Asia's spine, the railway, the ports, all the infrastructure that they are building. What changed America after the war was infrastructure, building the highway systems, the U.S. interstate system. Uh, where are all of our projects? They all seem to be just talk. High speed rail, high speed freight systems, freight rail. Any new ports? What are we doing? Where are new hubs? All we do is spend money in other countries for foreign war, to buy other people's resources. And it appears that all we've done is financed our country on the backs of other countries and their own infrastructure, including some of the ones that I've mentioned tonight. We treated India, China, we treated them as more or less colonies. We treated them as production hubs. We shipped all our manufacturing over there. We've done these things to ourselves. We need to change focus, get new ideas. But in order to get those, we need to understand what it is. And I really hope you find this presentation interesting and worthy, and it gives you the means to discuss some of these things intelligently on your own. But the conclusion I want you to sit with tonight is that the 21st century is being built by steel, concrete, new projects, infrastructure. Certainly, there's other places to talk about it. We need to talk some. We're not going to do it tonight, but people do need to realize that the administrative ends, the professional ends, insurance, especially legal structures, financial structures, those we still have a major part in, but those are changing as well. The 21st century, the capacity, the actual infrastructure of the things that are going to own it, those are being built by other countries, and the U.S. is not building them. U.S. isn't even addressing them. We can't even get a highway off the ground to connect Oklahoma, Colorado, Texas to the southern border. Depression. But Russia, India, and China are laying foundations for an alternate future. The north-south corridor, the international one, is real. The port, Chabahar, is real. Eastern Maritime Corridor is open. Kudankulam's reactors are actually on site. The power of Siberia pipelines are actually flowing. These are not concepts. They're contracts. They're cargo. Africa, all funded by China. Europe, all new projects funded by China. Costco, which is Chinese shipping, funding, and huge ports all over the globe. I'm not complaining. I'm telling you that we in the West haven't done anything remotely similar. Not to combat, but to have alternatives. Meanwhile, BRICS has alternatives. BRICS is creating alternatives everywhere, and Russia, India, China are creating their own powerhouse. That's what's happening. African arteries created by China. China's the banker, the builder, the operator. The Mombasa Nairobi SGR. The electrified rail lines, Djibouti ports, all made in China. If you're the African government, here's the cold truth. When Washington talks, it talks about democracy and regime change and funding the next whoever's going to be in charge in your country. But when Beijing shows up, it shows up with a loan and a bulldozer and says, hey, let's build you a port. Who are you going to pick long term? Seriously, people are tired of the U.S. coming in and telling you what they're gonna, what you're going to do. At least China says this, but it appears they're actually doing it too. They come in and they create alternatives for you with their Belt and Road Initiative. I'm not saying I agree with it, but the fact is they're funding and financing the world and no longer buying U.S. debt. And that's going to create a big problem for us going forward in the U.S. In Europe, trains roll in from China now 16 to 18,000 trains a year, where in 2011 there was only 20 a year that came from China. That's a huge increase. What about Moscow? Moscow is positioning itself not as a junior partner to this, but as the giant resource supplier, supplying all gas, all oil, most of the metal and nuclear expertise to both Asian continent places, India especially. That sixth reactor has already been shipped, and they have three more projects. I want to say they have those six reactors, which are going to fund the entire uh, region, not fund, but power the entire region of India that we're talking about. What's America doing? Sitting in Congress talking about a new Interstate 27 to take Colorado, Oklahoma, Texas, hook them to Mexico. That's infrastructure. Where are our ports? Where are new things? China, ports on both sides of South America. Trump did manage to take the fact that China was going to operate the ports on both ends of the Panama Canal, but didn't see much else. In the Americas, the story is kind of embarrassing. The biggest rail mergers, private. The biggest port investment, Chinese. Argentinian freight revival, financed by China. The Brazil North-South Railroad took 30 years. U.S. didn't orchestrate it or have anything to do with it. It didn't help at all. Meanwhile, China's all over the world, belts and roads, putting in other things. So I'm not pro-China. Don't go thinking I am. I'm not anti-U.S. I'm a patriot. Don't go thinking that I am either. But I am a realist. And the reality is Washington gets stuck in discussions and in I don't know, committee meetings on the Capitol, and nothing ever happens. And then when they try to fund it, they find some corrupt senator's nephew to take the project, and everything gets skimmed off the top, and nothing ever happens. With Russia, India, and China, most of the state-owned agencies are state-owned, and they can just act for longer, and they can act quicker. So, and over all of this, we have BRICS: Russia, India, China at the core, South Africa, and Brazil. Symbols. All the other BRICS plus expansion. It's granting options for everyone. So let's look at the scoreboard as I see it, and the way. And Donald Trump knows this. I can't imagine he doesn't. And the things that he says, even the fact that he left out BRICS in any conversation prior to his election. The first time I ever heard him talk about BRICS was after he'd already been elected. He didn't even bring it up. Nobody did. None of them. But afterward, about 2 weeks later, he mentioned BRICS, and he said, "Well, we're going to take out BRICS. We're going to tariff the hell out of them." Well, I don't think that's going to work for you. I didn't think that then, and I don't think it now. So the scoreboard, as I see it, is Russia, India, China. This center of BRICS is gaining coherence and cohesion in part because of all the projects I discussed with you through this diatribe today. And BRICS is expanding its legitimacy by all of the countries that are participating. They are up to over 40% of global GDP. They are bigger than the G7, the G20. They're more stuff, and they are getting more legitimate because of that. And the more legitimacy they get now, the more they can continue to develop, especially because China is financing it. India is the balancing of it, and Russia is the global supplier of natural resources, especially to these two, China and India. And they're not, what's the US doing? We're still debating. We're still wondering whether we're going to tariff the hell out of these people for buying that Russian oil. You can't be buying Russian gas, natural gas. You got to buy it from us. What are you going to do? Force me? You charge me more? Tell me I can't buy it? How is that in my country's best interest? That's what we're hearing from Modi. That's what we're hearing from Jai Shankar. That's what we're hearing from Xi Jinping. And that's what we're hearing from all of the Chinese foreign ministry that just came from India, by the way. We're sucking hind tit here, people. So let me get you to this. A container ship leaves China or India, sails across Russia's far east, unloads coal bound for, I don't know, India's steel mills, or goes to Africa. A Chinese built locomotive hauls Ethiopian exports down to Djibouti. In Peru, where China operates the port, the megaport has its first transshipment. Why in the world should they pay for this with US dollars? Do you think they're going to long term? Where is the US in this picture? Are we the global finance hub? That's not anymore. They're creating their own. And what are we doing? We're watching, we comment, we warn, we sanction, we tariff. But what have we built? Are we building any of this? We're destroying, we're creating war, we're bombing people. Let's build another military base somewhere. That's what we're doing. And my conclusion is this: the global order is being paved, it's being built in steel, it's being wired and fueled in rail and in pipeline. And whoever builds these routes sets the rules. And right now, that isn't Washington. It's Russia, India, China. It is BRICS. And it is China's Belt and Road Initiative. The train may have already left the station, but if it's still there and there's still a possibility to get on, is America going to buy a ticket? Or are we just set to seeing it on TV or pulling into some of the places as it services other areas of the globe? What does this mean for the SWIFT banking system? I've talked about BRICS in quite a bit and what the BRICS entities have been doing to now remember most of the money used to pay for trade between China and Russia right now it's as high as like 96%, might be 94, might be 92, but it's a huge percent is being paid for in the ruble and the yuan. That is what is happening. A huge portion of Russia and India trade is done in the rupee without the dollar. And remember, all of these had to go through SWIFT before. And why do they not? Because of sanctions, because Russia is in a conflict with Ukraine. Does it matter to us if Russia is in a conflict with Ukraine? I mean, in all seriousness, does it? What do we care? I mean, truthfully, does anybody really care? I don't think so. We're being told to care. We're being told. I'm in, where am I? I'm in Lithuania. And Saw some trains today, or trains, buses. Saw some, and on the top of the bus, I took a picture of it because it was, in my opinion, hilarious. And I'm in Vilnius, and in Vilnius, the buses are coming by, and I was standing outside a railway station, and on the buses that go across the top of the bus on the label that says where the bus is going, it's going here, it's going there, it's you're off to a city 20 miles away, whatever. But it says across top, uh, Lithuania loves Ukraine. Lithuania, heart Ukraina, and it's listed across top of every single bus going by. They're still here in windows. You walking down the street today, was headed to a couple of coffee shops to going to lunch or whatever, trying to wander around and get a couple of things toured under my belt today. Well, I'm here in Vilnius. First time I've been in Vilnius or Lithuania, for that matter. Country number 57 for me is Lithuania, and I was surprised at the number of Ukrainian flags in people's windows. And I was also surprised. I shouldn't say surprised. I thought this was a Florida thing. But when I speak Russian to, because here, a former Soviet republic, you believe, and most of the street signs are in three languages, appear to be Lithuanian, Russian, and I think it was English, but I can't. Three of them, but I know one was Russian. I know one is Lithuanian, of course. And but you go into a shop, and I know the guy speaks Russian, but he won't. They will not answer you in Russian in several places I went today, which I found to be rather interesting and kind of foolish. But this is the way the world is going. I have one more group of discussion topics I wanted to get to you today. And it is the final part of why I think all of this is important. It's like I said to you, the Ukraine war is the US's version of infrastructure dominance. We're buying the next country. We are funding the next global development site. We are attaching U.S. private sector to a new country. That's what we're doing. We are buying the land in Ukraine or allowing Western countries to do it. This is why we are involved. This is why we're trying to get to the Black Sea is what we're trying to do. In what do you call it? The UK really pumped a lot of money into Odessa trying to get there already. And so these are not, these are more colonialist tendencies that we've been engaged in, just like usual, going into another place, creating a war, hanging out for 20 years, selling all of our weapons, selling all of our infrastructure, selling machinery and equipment to local companies dominated by Western companies that buy more stuff. And then what? Then you leave, or then you hope that they are so locked in that they have to be stuck in your system and they continue to fund your debt structure. Well, that's not happening in the rest of the world. And I don't believe it's been the correct way to go about this from the very get go. If we had focused differently on Africa or South America, China wouldn't be in either one of them now. We would be. And what would be happening? We would be funding ports in South America, funding ports in Africa. But we're not, because all we did was fund regime change. You go in to whatever country, pick it, doesn't matter. You go into the Congo and you say, we're going to fund the next person in charge. We're going to have a referendum, and only the U.S. can tell you what the referendum is, and we're going to get rid of those corrupt other people, and we're going to back a new power group. Then we're going to fund it all through U.S. Agency for International Development. What has that done for you? Seriously, what has it done for the country you're trying to influence? Have you put any effort in infrastructure? Nope. You give money to the new guy you just bought, and he uses it to fund his own pals and whatever corrupt schemes that he's going to do. But have you built anything for that country? No. You've maybe provided it over the years. What do you always remember seeing? Food. We're sending over doctors. We're sending over shipping containers full of food and supplying them because they can't supply themselves. But what have we done to fund them? Where's the infrastructure? China is no longer investing in US debt. They are building infrastructure in South America. They're building infrastructure, financing infrastructure in Africa, in the Middle East, in freaking Greece, for God's sake. If China is building rail systems and port systems that end in Europe and in Greece, and the US is not, who's right and who's wrong? And oh, geez, you're a sympathist with a sympathetic person for China and for Russia. No, I'm a realist. And and the reality is, this is what's happening. We go fund war in Afghanistan for 20 years and get nothing out of it. Nothing. What did we get out of that? Zip. What have we gotten out of anything that we have done in the Middle East over the years, except for temporary stolen profits, or maybe some long-term stolen profits for private individuals in America, in the West? Same thing as colonialists did for the last couple hundred years, right? China, not. China's funding new ports. China's running new ports. Hell, India's running a port in Iran. Nonsense. I mean, it's not nonsense. Good for them. But and they're building different structures. What are we doing? We're funding regimes. We're funding war. It's depressing to me, and I've railed about it for far too long. I need to get back to my final points in this because I'm hoping that I have enough time to go through why I believe this is important. A flashback now to what happened with Donald Trump, Vladimir Putin in Alaska. Remember me talking about the red carpet treatment that Donald Trump really did give to Vladimir Putin. I think he recognizes the economic changes. I think he recognizes that the U.S. doesn't want to be in Ukraine in a war. I don't know how he gets out of it. The fact is, we have created, I don't believe Russia is our enemy, but we have created a system over the last 30 years since was in the armed forces as a Russian interpreter, that has made it quite difficult to ease out of this with all of the talks without the US looking extremely foolish. I think it's too late, and I think it'd probably be better if Donald Trump just pulled the plug on Ukraine. Or hell, sanction both of them, say finalize this and I'll lift the sanctions, and walk away. Quit giving. I read an article that was published about me after my interview in Moscow last week with that television station. I got a copy of the article today that was sent to me, and I was reading it. The news content, the video content, she said would be coming out here in the next day or two. They also agreed to publish an article I wrote, which is really cool. That should be coming out in Russian in Russia at a newspaper out there. And I'll provide a copy when I do, or I'll read it. Well, it's in Russian, so I probably wouldn't. But at any rate, I got a copy of it today, and it was talking about some of the same things that I'm talking about right here. The red carpet treatment that Donald Trump was providing to Vladimir Putin, and why. And I believe that Donald Trump knows Not that the U.S. couldn't ultimately defeat Russia. We could. But that maybe. That remains to be seen. But if nobody wants to see it, nobody wants to do it. But I believe that he respects Vladimir Putin. I believe that he knows that we have, and that America and him personally, we really have no desire and no real reason to have Russia as an enemy. Why is Russia an enemy? Because we've been mistaken in what we've been doing for a number of years. And that I think that Donald Trump knows that this has to change. So let's go a little bit deeper. The media covered like it would a theater thing, you know. Somebody's rolling out the red carpet. Here's the Emmys. Let's here's Donald Trump in his best outfit, and here's Vladimir Putin showing up in an evening gown, you know. And here they are, blah blah blah. Anyway, I'm being facetious, but the media covered it like, you know, theater stuff: handshakes, ultimatums, smirks, who got to ride in whose limo, who got to speak first, you know. But the real story is that the meeting wasn't about Ukraine, because it wasn't. It was about what Donald Trump knows to be true. And here's what I think he knows. I think he knows that the future of the world is not just the US, it's Russia, India, China, RIC, the center of BRICS. And Trump doesn't want to be left out. The US is spinning its wheels, certainly on infrastructure projects. You know, we can't get anything done. You know, deadlock in uh, Washington, and our debt crisis, which is enormous, means that the U.S. just spins its wheels. And that if Donald Trump doesn't do something drastic, America is even more quickly on the path to its own decline. And he realizes we built that decline for ourselves. That's my point. And this is bigger than Ukraine. First of all, let's get it straight. The war in Ukraine really does matter. But in the big picture, all it is a symptom. It isn't the disease itself. Solving the war in Ukraine doesn't solve the big problem. The big problem is economic decline and failure of diplomacy. There's been zero diplomacy from the Joe Biden team at all. And Trump at least is making an effort. They're at least talking. And if you watch the counterparts, Russia, India, China, what are they building? They disagree with each other, but what are they doing? They're talking. They show up in BRICS. They're at the RIC conference right now. They're talking to each other right now. They're building ports, they're building rails, they're building pipelines, like I've mentioned in this entire 2-hour deep dive into what they're doing that is so different from what we're doing. America's pouring money into what? War, sanction, tariff, walls. You know, RIC is creating trade corridors. Washington creates war and deadlock. So when Trump sat down with Putin, nobody knows what they really talked about for whatever it was, the 7-minute ride in the van, or in the limo, I mean. They sat down in there. I don't think they were talking about Donbass or Crimea and how you're going to end it. I think they were going to something bigger, trying to assemble something, that America is changing course. I hope that's what it was. Because if they don't, if we do not, we're going to be left behind in the economic changes of the 21st century. Trump is a CEO, friends and neighbors. Trump thinks like a CEO. He sees America as a company that used to dominate in every industry, but now it's facing aggressive new competitors all over: Russia, India, China, BRICS. The competitors are leaner, to use industry terms, faster, hungrier, and they're not wasting capital on vanity war projects like Ukraine. Well, Russia's being forced to. But Trump knows he can't change fundamentals. He can't make America state directed like China is, that's a certain disadvantage to us. We're not as resource dominant as Russia is, or we are certainly not a demographic surging country like India. What he can do is try to cut losses. And the biggest loss right now is a grinding war in Ukraine that drains U.S. credibility and treasure, while Russia, India, and China are doubling down on development in Asia. For Trump, ending the war isn't just about peace and getting his own Nobel Peace Prize. It's about slowing down America's self imposed decline. In Washington, endless gridlock. Bills don't get anywhere. Infrastructure goes nowhere. Capital markets are owned by private sectors chasing quarterly profits, and we have zero long term focus. Nothing. It's all about short term. And RIC, government acts, not private sector. Russia funds Rashtrattara. India signs a 10-year port deal. China builds a $3.5 billion megaport in Peru and a $62 billion infrastructure project, freaking Pakistan. That is infrastructure. That's what they're doing. I'm not talking ideology, I'm talking ownership of structure. RIC marshals resources quickly. Washington spins its wheels. Trump knows this. Trump is not an academic. He's not quoting multipolarity, but he can read a balance sheet. Well, he's not, of course, he's not talking about multipolarity now. Marco Rubio talked about multipolarity, a few times now. And I don't believe he'd do that without Donald Trump's permission, or at least knowledge. But Donald Trump knows how to read a balance sheet, doesn't he? And the balance sheet says what? America is spending on politics and war. Russia, India, and China are investing in what? Economics, logistics hubs, infrastructure projects, uh, political nation building versus economic nation building. Like I said, America in the last 30 years, we focus on political nation building. Think about it. Iraq. Did that work? Nope. Afghanistan, 20 years. Did that work? Nope. Libya. Did that work? Nope. Billions spent to prop up systems that collapsed anyway. And what did we get for it? Meanwhile, China's building, last 20 years, railways, pipelines, ports, nuclear plants. They're not buying US debt anymore. They're spending billions on infrastructure, which will do what? This is important. This infrastructure is going to outlast the governments that created it. It's going to outlast war. It's going to outlast sanctions. Think about the nuclear power plant that Russia is building for India in India. 6 reactors, huge. And they have several more lined up after that. This is the first one. With 6 reactors, that's an enormous power plant. Most of them have one, if not, they have 2. This one has 6. This is huge. And who built it? Rosatom. The difference is that power plant's going to be around for generations, a long time. And who's going to run it? Who's going to have the engineers? Over time, Russia's going to turn it over, but they got like a 60-year contract or something like that on that power plant alone. And they got several more lined up. Trump isn't going to frame it in the way that, he's not disillusioned. I don't think. I still think he's a very smart man and that he actually knows what he is doing. But I also fear that his options are limited. His hands are partially tied, right? He's not going to frame it as, nation building. He's going to talk about bad deals and America first. But the instinct in his gut is right. We can't afford to keep wasting blood and treasure on BS wars while others are seizing the economic high ground. The irony is, Trump can't stop the trend. of multipolarity. He can't stop the BRICS trend. He knows he can't. No U.S. president can act like Xi Jinping or Putin or Modi. Our systems aren't the same. They're not designed for state driven megaprojects. We can't fund them the way they can. But Trump can try to blunt our decline and try to end wars, redirect money to economic purposes, cut deals that free up U.S. capital for domestic growth. He can triage some of the things that have been going on for generations. Well, at least my generation. And he might not be able to transform the world, but he can stop what's going on, hopefully, stop us from wasting our time on funding more war. And that's what the Alaska summit was really all about. It was a CEO level recognition that if you don't close out the money losing division, the whole company's going to go under. So I don't know. The takeaway from all this, Alaska, don't look at it as just another summit. It was Trump's attempt to signal what he knows, but will not say outright. RIC is acting while Washington debates. Multipolarity is being built by RIC, not argued. Ukraine is a bleeding wound American can no longer afford. I don't think Ukraine can afford it either. U.S. decline, if you want to call it that, is self-imposed, but it's not irreversible if we get away from the never-ending grind of internal BS politics and get back to economic growth. Trump isn't trying to change the future. I don't think he can. He's trying to buy America time. You know, regimes, what do you want to call it? Societies, Rome rose and fell, Egypt rose and fell, empires rise and fall, France, England, name it. We rise and, we're going to fall at some point. But hopefully we can have a long-term existence because he's trying to buy America time because the longer we fight wars for political illusion that we're really the big dog, the further RIC, Russia, India, China, the further BRICS is going to pull ahead with economic reality. That's what I have to say. Russia, India, China, these are reality. And I believe Trump knows it. He knows that Xi Jinping, Vladimir Putin, and Modi know it. The only question is whether anyone in America will ever recognize that Washington isn't built to defeat this sort of economic threat. We can't defeat the 1.48 billion in India and the 1.4 billion in China and the resource-driven powerhouse of Russia playing the same old colonialist games that we have been playing for years. I hope that Washington and the rest of America finally wake up and quit arguing about, Ukraine when it should just be cut off. We need to notice what's really going on in the world, and I don't think that we do. So that is the show today, friends and neighbors. I'm very glad that you have listened and signed up. This is a pre-recorded show for my Sunday night on damradio.com/live. And I usually come, but I'm traveling, like I said. So I've done this show early, but it will be played on Sunday night. You can always go to internationalflavor.com and listen to my shows. I hope that you do. I hope that you like the program, provide your likes, shares, that kind of thing. And on internationalflavor.com, you can download all of my previous shows. And on damradio.com, you can listen to many of our other commentators, most of them on the state of Missouri or even local levels. And Join us